Hi guys, in this beginner's tutorial I wanted to show you how I created this red panda in pastels. I'm using minimal supplies and I'm showing you exactly what I'm doing step by step along the way so that you can get started using pastels as well. So let's get on to the tutorial. The paper that I'm using today is called Pastel Mat and it comes in a pad of 12 sheets. It's 170 pounds or 360 GSM. It really feels quite like a card and it's an almost sanded kind of surface, but it still feels really quite smooth in comparison to a lot of sanded papers. I'm just using the white pad today, but you can buy it in numerous different colours as well. And if you have a look inside, each page comes with its own protective sheet. So this surface is by Clairefontaine, and I'll leave a link in the description to all the supplies that I'm using today so you can check them out if you like. The next supplier that I'm using are pan pastels, and these come in many different colours, but I'm choosing to use a set of 10 and it's called the Painting 30101 set. I'll post a link in the description to the exact set so that you can see exactly what colours are in this set as well. And they all twist onto each other so that you can stack them up and keep them together. It makes for easy storage as well. So these are all soft pastels that have been compressed into a pan. They're probably the least messiest way that you can work with pastels. So if you struggle with working with charcoals or pastel sticks, then this is a really good way to go. So the way that you apply the pan pastels is with these soft tools. It's SOFFT. And in a set you usually get 2 of the applicator sticks and a few sponges on the side as well. Some of the sponges that I have look a little dirty. They're actually clean, they're just stained from previous uses and I've just washed them with soap and water to clean them up a bit so that there's no excess pastel on there that will come off onto your next artwork. So the way that these work is by sliding the little sponges onto the applicators. It's a little bit of a struggle to get on to begin with and they do tear quite easily, so just be a bit careful when you're sliding them on. And then to use them with the pan pastels, it's really quite simple. All you need to do is gently rub the applicator over the pan and it will bring up some pastel. Obviously don't want to do it right now, I'll show you when we get into the project. And you can get a few different shaped applicator sticks other than what I've got shown here, and also some bigger sponges and different shaped sponges as well. So if you're getting into pan pastels and you're after something a bit different or a different kind of shape, and then they are available to purchase as well. And the final supply that I'll be using today are these Carbothello pastel pencils. And they're basically just a soft pastel compressed into a pencil form. These are by Stabilo, and I'll also leave a link in the description to these supplies as well so you can check them out. So these are really useful to get the details on top of the pan pastels. If you're wondering how to sharpen pastel pencils, as they're a little bit softer than coloured pencils or graphite pencils, for example, they tend to crumble a little bit. I've actually made a video explaining how to do that, and I'll link that in the description, so make sure you check that out if you are struggling to sharpen them. I always tape down my artwork to a board and I just leave like a 1/2 inch gap all the way around. And this way you have something to hold on to at the end of the piece that doesn't have pastel on it, so you don't smudge your work and you don't get pastel on your fingers. And it also keeps it nice and flat and still throughout the working process. And I've just got my line drawing down by using transfer paper, but you can use whatever method you like to get your drawing onto your piece. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to show you is how I'm blending the pan pastels. So I'm basically just grabbing my soft tool and taking up a bit of the pastel by rubbing on the pan. And then I've just got a piece of printer paper to the side there, which I'm laying the pastel down on because it's nice and smooth, so it'll help blend the pastel together easily, and because it's not a sanded surface, the pastel doesn't stick to that paper quite as much, so you can easily lift it back off again. So I'm basically just taking the colours that I need, kind of like painting, and adding them to this piece of paper until I've got the desired colour for this piece. So I'm just going to speed it up now to show you all of the different greens that I've created using these colours of pan pastel. It is easier if you did have a bigger set of pan pastels because obviously you don't need to mix every single colour that you need. But if if you're just starting out and you can't afford a bigger set of pan pastels, or you just simply don't want that many, it's not necessary. You don't need that many. So this is just a basic set of 10 pan pastels that you can get in a pack with the tools, which I explained earlier, but you can create every colour that you need out of these. And to use all of your pre-blended colours, all you need to do is the same thing as if you were picking up the pastel from your pan. So just grab the soft tool and swipe over the colour and then lay it onto your piece. And I just wanted to show you a different way that you can blend your pan pastels as well, which is just putting it straight onto the piece of paper, like I'm doing here. So I've just grabbed some blue and I've put it onto the artwork, and then I've got some yellow and I'm blending that in as well. So it's really actually quite easy to blend as you go on the piece. And I'm showing you here what I was saying before about just swiping over the colour, and it lifts back up again so that you can spread it onto your piece as well. You can buy pastel mat in a variety of different colours, but I've chosen to use the white for a number of reasons. If you buy the white in the pastel mat pad, and that means that you can use that same piece of paper, like the same colour for every project that you do. Whereas if you buy those mixed coloured pads, sometimes it's hard to work on certain subjects with the wrong colour card. So if you buy the white and then you won't have that problem, you can use that for every subject. Also, the colours seem to show up quite a lot brighter on the white. They seem to come out a little more dull on the tone papers. And like, don't get me wrong, I use the tone papers probably more often than I use the white one. But that's because I have a variety of different sheets that I buy in like single sheets by itself. So I have the option to use whatever colour I feel like. But if you're just starting out, the white pastel mat pad is probably the best bet because you can use that for every subject. And the trick to getting a really nice smooth looking bouquet background while using pan pastels is to just make sure that you keep layering and blending the colours into each other until you get the desired effect. And I chose to do this bouquet kind of style background because it's probably one of the easiest backgrounds to do. You can't really go wrong with it. So you can use a variety of different colours and they don't have to be exact to the reference photo. And making it smooth is quite a lot easier than trying to get the background really detailed and things like that. So this is a good beginner's project to work on because it will always look good no matter what you do with the bouquet background. It's hard to screw that up. So once you've started adding more and more layers, you'll notice it's easier to blend in the colours straight on the artwork when you're placing the pan pastel onto the artwork. And you'll feel it when you're blending your soft tool around, it will feel a lot smoother and it will look a lot softer as well. So just keep going until you get to that stage where everything looks nice and soft and smooth and you can't see those little white bits come through from the paper. So you can see with my background that I've actually gone slightly over the edges of the red panda outline. And this is because when we go to do the red panda, I'm going to overlap that fur onto the background slightly, and this will stop that sort of halo effect that you get around your subject when you stop the background right on the edge of your subject. It stops it looking like a cut and paste, like you've just cut out the red panda and stuck it on a different background, because it's overlapping and blending into each other this way. And you can see from the finished piece that there are leaves that are coming in front and behind the red panda, and you can kind of see in the background here I've left some of the white spaces, but I've still gone over them with the pan pastel around the edges anyway, but I'll go back and fill those in a bit later on down the piece, so that's why the white is still left there for that. So once I've got in the majority of colours there, I'm just going back through with the lighter colours like white and yellow and lighter green just to create those circles on top of the colours. And they're not defined circles or, really defined edges on the circles either. It's just to give it that bit of more of a bouquet look, I guess. If you find that you've gone too far into the outline of the red panda, you can use a kneadable eraser like I'm doing here, and all I'm doing is pressing it into the paper and then lifting up a bit of pastel and then shaping it into whatever shape I need to and continue doing it that way. This helps just remove a lot of the pastel. It won't remove all of it, but it will help so that you can layer more pastel on top. So I'm just going to go through and add some of the darker greens that I've just mixed on the side there to the corners of the piece. And this just helps the viewer focus more in the center of the piece where the red panda's face is. if you put the darker bits in the corners, it just stops the eyes from drifting off the painting a bit. So here you can see me come through with my finger, and I'm just pushing the pastel into the paper so that I'm blending it nice and smooth and there's no harsh edges left. A question that I get asked a bit is, how do you keep your pans clean? So if you've put blue or green into your yellow, for example, how do you get that out so that you can use pure yellow if you need it for next time? So I'm literally just grabbing a tissue and wiping the surface of the pan pastel. It doesn't take too much of the pastel off, and as you can see, it pretty much goes back to exactly how it was when I bought it. So I'm just doing that now so that I don't have to clean it at the end of the project, or if I decide that I want to use those colours throughout the project and then they're ready to go without any contamination from any other colours. And you can also clean your soft tools as well. So I've basically just got a cloth here and I'm wiping off the excess pastel onto the cloth until it comes off clean. You can actually wash them in water with soap as well, but they take a while to dry. Obviously, you can't use them again straight away. So if you're using it for the same project, I would just recommend wiping off the excess pastel onto a cloth like this, and then you can use it again straight away. So this works pretty well in most cases, unless you're going for like a pure white area or an area that can't have any other color whatsoever in it. In that case, I'll grab a brand new soft tool cover, or I'll grab one that I've previously cleaned with soap and water and is dry and ready to go. So I've got a clean piece of printer paper to the side there, and I'm just mixing some of the base colors for the red panda now. And I'm using a much smaller, softer tool. It kind of looks like an eyeshadow tool, but it's not the same as an eyeshadow tool, so don't try and use that instead of the soft tools. They don't quite work the same. And the reason that I'm using the smaller tool is so that I can get into all the little detailed areas in the piece. So I don't want to overlap into the eye or anywhere that's supposed to be white. And that way I can keep my outlines nice and crisp as well without having, that larger soft tool intruding onto the other areas of the piece where I don't want the pastel to be at the moment. And when you're working on the base layer of your main subject, don't add as many layers as the background, because we're going to be adding pastel pencil on top of that. So we still need some of the rough texture of the paper to be able to come through for the pastel pencils to stick to. And just remember that when you're working on your base layer, you're actually working from the back to the front. So you're layering fur on top of the fur that is underneath. And this means that you need to start with a color that's underneath for the base layer. So sometimes it's quite hard to know which color to use. So if you get stuck, just choose a darker color than what you want your end product to be. So that way when you go and add your fur details on top, they will show up. Whereas if you went straight in with the lightest color, you can't add lighter colors on top of that. This red panda has like a darker red orange kind of base in a lot of the areas. And the fur that sits on top is quite a light color. So it's an easy subject to work out which color to lay down first. So you can see that I'm applying the pastel in the direction of the fur, even at this point in the base layers, because it will show through in the final layers as well if you don't put the strokes in the same direction as the fur. So just make sure that you're paying attention to the reference photo and, change the direction of your pastel strokes if the fur has changed direction. So I'm moving on to the black part of the fur on the red panda, and black and white are they're troublesome colours for a lot of people when they're first starting out when it comes to fur. And the trick is to try and see those other colours other than black or white in the fur. For example, the light on this piece is actually showing up this kind of bluey purpley colour on the edges of the black fur. And you can see me adding that on the edges there rather than just doing black all the way through. And I've also added some of that bluey purple colour throughout the black as well. And this just stops it looking flat in the end. And people say all the time that you shouldn't use black in your artwork, but I use black all the time. I just make sure that I've added other colours with it or on top of it so it doesn't stay just black. And a good way to see those extra colours that you might not necessarily see, especially when you're first starting out, is to just import your reference photo into a program like Paint or Photoshop or something like that where they have an eyedropper tool, and you can go through and pick up all those little colours in the black fur and just create swatches if you need to on the side, and then just match the colours to that. And just remember that when you're working in realism, the most important thing is your values, not the color. So making sure that your darks are dark enough and your lights are light enough is more important than trying to get that perfect color. And a good way to check if your values are correct is just to take a picture of your artwork and turn it into black and white, and do the same for your reference photo and just compare the two. So now I'm going to move on to the leaves that are in front of the panda and also behind the panda. The ones that are in front, I will be adding more layers of pastel pencil on top just to define the detail a bit better. But the ones that are in the background that are behind the panda, I will be blending them nice and smooth to blend in with the background. I'm adding a bit more of the blue colours to these leaves, so just so that it stands out a bit more from the yellowy toned background and doesn't blend in too much with that. Just so you can tell that they're actually leaves that are sitting in front of the background but behind the panda. And then I'm just going to go through and blend everything out with my fingers again. And when I'm blending things out with my fingers, it's just so that I'm pushing the excess pastel into the paper so that the grain, like the tooth of the paper, is still available to be able to add more layers on top. I left the eyes and the nose and any little area that had quite a lot of detail that I couldn't get with the soft pastels, I left them white just so that it would be easier to be able to see the outline that I had originally down, and I can just go straight in with the pastel pencils on those areas because it'll be easier than using the soft tool for that. And I'm just starting to go in with the fur detail on the left hand side of the panda there. So I'm just overlapping the bits of fur onto the background like I was explaining before. Under my hand, I've just got a piece of glassine or tracing paper. You can use any paper. This is just what I had available, but sometimes I just use like a printer paper or something like that. It's just to stop your hand from smudging the artwork or getting the oils from your hand onto the artwork, or, you know, getting pastel all over your hands. You don't have to have your pastel pencils extremely sharp for the majority of the piece. It's a little hard to sharpen pastel pencils if you haven't tried before. I'll leave a link in the description to a video that I have specifically about sharpening pastel pencils, but in reality you don't actually need to have them extremely sharp for most of it. So now that we're starting to use the pastel pencils, you can see that by leaving a lot of the tooth of the paper available for the base layer of the red panda, so not blending it as smooth and adding as much pastel as what we did in the background, when you leave it so that some of the tooth of the paper shows through and some of the white of the paper is still there, as you can see on that black bit on the bottom of the panda, some of the paper is still showing, and you want that on the base of the panda so that when you go and add your pastel pencils on top, there's something for it to stick to. If you add too much pastel to the tooth of the paper to begin with, it's going to be really hard to add pastel on top. There is a limit to how much you can add. The more that you work on sanded paper and with pastels, the more you get to know how much you can actually add to the paper. The trick with pastels is that it's a layering process, but not like oils. For example, when you use oils, you can continue layering and layering with different colors until you get the desired effect. Whereas with pastels, you can only get a few layers until you can't add any more. So the trick is to add as many different colors as you can throughout each layer separately. So don't go and add the same dark orange brown to the entire thing, but instead vary the color slightly over your entire piece so that you get a more realistic, not so flat look. So I'm starting to work on the eyes now, and this is an area where I really slow down and make sure that I'm looking at my reference photo even more than I'm looking at my own artwork, just to make sure that it's really accurate to the reference photo. If you get, you know, the fur detail slightly wrong, or, you know, color in a slightly different spot with the fur, it doesn't matter as much as if you get the pupil in the wrong spot, or the eye is too big or slightly slanted, or the color is off on one eye but not on the other. It's really noticeable in the end result. So I just really make sure that the eyes are the main focal point and that there's enough detail in there to make it look realistic as well. For me, the eyes are the most important part of any piece. It really gives life to the artwork and makes you almost feel like you can see the animal's personality or the soul behind the eyes. So I make sure that I spend as much time on them as I need to make it look as realistic as possible. So I'm working on the nose area now. And that's also a bit of a sticking point in a lot of people's projects where they don't know how to draw a nose. It's not about how to draw a nose, it's about what that abstract shape looks like on your reference photo and copying that abstract shape. So no nose is going to look the same. If you put it in a different lighting, it's going to look different. So I try and think of it not as a nose, but as, you know, a series of different colors or shapes. So that way you can copy that exactly, rather than thinking, oh, it's a nose, I'll draw it like a nose. It doesn't usually end up looking realistic if you have that kind of mindset. Okay, so here you can see me coming in with a grey colour, and I'll come in with some blues and other lighter colours on the black area, and it's just to bring out some of that fur detail. So where the light is hitting some areas, you'll be able to see some more blue and some more grey amongst the black, so it's not all a solid sort of black colour. So I'm going in with some lighter pinks and some yellows and some brighter oranges to lighten up some of the areas on the orange part of the fur as well. And I'm also varying the lengths of the strokes, and the slight curve of the strokes are all a little bit different, because in nature the fur doesn't usually line up exactly in line like a picket fence. It overlaps and weaves, and some hairs stick out a little bit, or it curves over another piece of hair. So just keep that in mind when you're doing fur or hair or anything like that, that it should be varied slightly. So when I say make sure that the fur is going in the right direction, I mean in general, like overall, it should look like it's going in the right direction, but make sure that you are varying your strokes a little bit so it doesn't all look lined up like a picket fence. So I moved on to the leaves that are sitting in front of the panda, and I've just added a bunch of different yellows and greens, and I've tried to pick brighter colours than what's in the background. So I've used a bit of teal, some really bright yellow and some whites, just to crisp up those edges and make it look like it's in front of the panda rather than it like the same colour as the background. So here you can see me blending out the pastel with a cotton tip. This is a good tool to use instead of your fingers when you're getting into those really tight little detailed areas, so that you don't smudge the pastel into each other. And I'm just doing this to blend out some of the pastel strokes that I left with the pencils, just so it looks a little softer and more even throughout the piece. So there's not as many harsh lines to create that softer look that the red panda actually has in real life. So now I'm going to go through with the white pencil and just bring out some of the lightest fur detail in the lighter areas there. And also some of those pinks and oranges as well to brighten up that orangey kind of coloured part of the fur. So here I've got my white pan pastel out again, and I'm just adding this on top of the pastel pencils. So you can actually work in whatever order you like. So you can add pastel pencils on top of the pan pastels or vice versa. You just got to make sure that you're not filling up the tooth of the paper with too much pastel, and yeah, you can work back and forth that way. And the reason I'm using the white pan pastel again is because it's a softer pastel than what's in the pencils, meaning that it will lay on top of most colours quite bright in comparison to the pastel pencil. And so I felt like the white areas of the red panda weren't quite bright enough, so I've gone and got the white pastel out and used that for some of the brighter areas instead, and it gives it that nice soft look as well. So I'm just going back in with the white pencil to bring out some of those details again after using the pan pastel. Okay, so here I'm just adding in some detail with this sort of warm grey colour, and I'm using it to add in those little, I guess you call them paws, where the whiskers come from. And then I'm using it on the rest of the piece in any areas where they needed a little bit of a darker sort of grey detail to it. So here you can see how I'm adding the whiskers to the red panda. So I've sharpened my pastel pencil to quite a fine point, and this is one of the only times that I will sharpen my pastel to quite a fine point. And you can see after pretty much every stroke or every second stroke, I've rotated the pencil in my hand slightly so that I've got that slightly sharper point to it. And I'm going back to sharpen my pencil every few strokes as well to make sure that I continue having that sharp point on my pencil so that the whiskers are nice and crisp and not a smudge. And adding whiskers as a final detail on top of pastel can sometimes be a bit tricky, and a lot of the time it's because people have laid too much pastel down on the paper to begin with, so they don't have any tooth to add the whiskers on top. So yeah, the more that you work in pastels, the more that you'll realize when to stop and when you can't add any more pastel on top. But if you work in the way that I'm working now, you should be fine adding the little whiskers on top. And with whiskers, it's the same as the fur or hair, where you don't want to have the same length strokes. You want to vary it up a little bit, and you want them to curve slightly differently. And you also want some to be brighter than others. So you'll see me sometimes use a lighter hand to get a more see-through kind of stroke, and then other times I'll press a little harder so that it's more opaque. And when I get near the end of the piece, I step back from my artwork quite a bit just to see if there's anything that stands out to me that needs to be brighter or crisper, or needs a little more detail or something like that. So you'll see me adding a few more yellows to the leaves here and some more teal kind of colours just to bring them out a little bit better. And once you're finished with your drawing, you can peel off the masking tape. And this is me doing it in real time just to show you how slowly I'm doing it, just to make sure that you don't rip any of your paper. Even before I put down masking tape, I usually stick it to my clothing and then take it off and put it onto my artwork. That way it removes some of the tack before I actually put it onto my artwork, so it's less likely to pull up any of my paper when I pull it off. So if you guys did have a go at this tutorial, I'd love to see what you've created. Just tag me on social media. I'm at Kirsty Rebecca Fine Art on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as well. I've got a bunch of other tutorials on my YouTube channel working in a few different mediums. But otherwise, if you liked this tutorial, let me know. Leave a comment below, or if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear from you as well. And I'll see you in the next video.